Imagine for a moment that the entire world, with its jagged mountains, its deep oceans, and the distant glow of the stars, is not something that is simply out there waiting to be discovered, but rather a construction of your own mind. Imagine that space and time are not infinite containers where events occur, but are the contact lenses through which your eyes interpret the chaos of existence. This idea, which sounds like modern science fiction or a premise from a Christopher Nolan film, was the intellectual earthquake that shook the foundations of humanity in the year 1781. The author of this seismic shift was not an adventurer or a mystic, but a man of habit so rigid that the inhabitants of his hometown, Königsberg, would set their watches when they saw him pass by on his daily afternoon walk. His name was Immanuel Kant, and his masterpiece, The Critique of Pure Reason, is probably the most difficult, dense, and yet transformative book ever written in the history of Western thought. To understand why this book is a backbone of our culture, we must go back to the atmosphere of the 18th century. It was the era of the Enlightenment, a time when humanity decided it no longer needed the tutelage of religious institutions or blind traditions to find the truth. The motto was Sapere Aude, which means dare to know. However, in the midst of this rationalist optimism, a profound identity crisis emerged. On one side, we had the rationalists, heirs of René Descartes, who believed that human reason, on its own, could unveil the secrets of the universe, the existence of God, and the immortality of the soul simply through pure logic. On the other side were the empiricists, led by the Scotsman David Hume, who argued with devastating elegance that all our knowledge comes solely from sensory experience. Hume reached a terrifying conclusion: if we can only trust what we see and touch, then concepts like causality or identity are mere customs, mental habits without a solid basis in reality. It was this provocation from Hume that woke Kant from what he called his dogmatic slumber. Kant realized that if Hume was right, science itself was in danger, as there would be no universal laws, only assumptions based on repetition. This conflict was not a simple cafe debate, but a struggle for the survival of objective truth. Kant spent more than a decade in silence, ruminating on these ideas, before publishing the first edition of his Critique. The book is a massive deconstruction of how the machinery of our mind works. Kant proposes what he calls his Copernican revolution. Just as Nicolaus Copernicus changed the perspective of the cosmos by suggesting that the Earth revolved around the Sun and not the other way around, Kant proposed that it is not knowledge that must conform to objects, but that objects must conform to our way of knowing. This is revolutionary. It means that the subject, meaning us, are not passive recipients of information, but active architects of reality. To explain this, Kant divides his work into complex sections, starting with the transcendental aesthetic. Here, the word aesthetic does not refer to art or beauty, but to sensibility, the act of perceiving through the senses. Kant maintains that space and time are not external realities that exist by themselves in the empty universe. If we took away all the objects in the universe, there would not be an empty space left waiting to be filled, because space is a pure form of our sensory intuition. It is, so to speak, the operating system that comes pre-installed in the human brain to process the data we receive. Without space and time, we could perceive absolutely nothing. They are the prior conditions for any experience. This perspective leads us to one of the most famous and controversial distinctions in philosophy: the difference between the phenomenon and the noumenon. The phenomenon is the thing as it appears to us, filtered by our mental faculties, organized by space, time, and the categories. It is the world we see, smell, and measure with science. But Kant warns us with staggering intellectual humility that we can never know the noumenon, the thing in itself, that is reality as it is independently of our perception. Imagine you were born with blue-tinted glasses stuck to your face that you can never take off. You would say the world is blue, you would measure shades of blue, and you would build laws about blue. But you would never know what color the world is without those glasses. Kant tells us that we are trapped in our own humanity. This frontier marks the limit of pure reason. Reason will always want to jump over the wall. It will want to talk about what lies beyond, about the essence of God or the origin of time, but when it tries, it falls into inevitable contradictions that Kant calls antinomies. But to understand how we can be so sure that an apple will fall to the ground or that 2 + 2 = 4, we must delve into the second part of his analysis, the transcendental analytic. This is where Kant introduces the categories of understanding. If sensibility gives us sensations, understanding is what cooks them to turn them into concepts. Kant identifies 12 categories such as causality, substance, or unity. These categories are not learned through experience, but are the structure that makes experience possible. For example, when we see one billiard ball hit another and the second one moves, Hume said we only see a sequence of events. Kant responds that our mind imposes the category of causality upon that event. It is not that nature has laws, it is that we legislate over nature. The magnitude of this idea is hard to exaggerate. If the mind sets the laws, then scientific knowledge is secure because all human beings share the same mental structure. This saved science from Hume's skepticism, but at a high cost, the recognition that we will never know absolute reality. However, Kant's ambition does not stop at explaining science. He wants to know why human beings seem programmed to ask ourselves questions we cannot answer. This is where the transcendental dialectic comes in, the section where Kant analyzes the great illusions of reason. Pure reason, according to him, has a natural tendency to seek the unconditioned. It wants to find a first cause for the entire universe, a simple unity we call the soul, and a supreme being we call God. Kant argues that these are not realities we can prove through logic, but they are not absurd errors either. They are regulative ideas. They function like a compass that pushes us to seek more and more knowledge, even if we never reach the final destination. It is a tragic and beautiful vision of the human condition. We are condemned to seek the absolute truth while knowing it is outside our sensory reach. The depth of this approach forces us to look at the historical repercussions of his work. After the publication of the Critique of Pure Reason, the world of thought was never the same again. Later philosophers like Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Arthur Schopenhauer, or Friedrich Nietzsche had to deal with the shadow of Kant. Hegel tried to tear down the barrier of the noumenon by suggesting that reality itself is thought in evolution. Schopenhauer, on the contrary, embraced the idea of the thing in itself, but identified it with a blind and suffering will that underlies everything we see. Even 20th century existentialism and phenomenology owe their existence to the fact that Kant put the subject at the center of the stage. But beyond academia, Kant's legacy breathes in our daily lives and in today's most cutting-edge scientific debates. If we analyze modern neuroscience, we find direct echoes of Kantian philosophy. Today's neuroscientists tell us that the brain is not a camera that records reality, but an organ that predicts and constructs models of the world based on limited sensory stimuli. Experiments on the perception of time and space in patients with brain lesions confirm that these dimensions are not properties of the external world, but functions of neuronal processing. When Kant spoke of the pure forms of intuition, he was describing, without knowing it, the biological architecture of our perception. Even in the field of artificial intelligence, Kant's ideas are more alive than ever. When engineers design neural networks for a machine to learn to recognize a cat or a face, they are giving that machine prior categories, an algorithmic structure that allows it to organize raw data. The debate over whether an artificial intelligence can become conscious or if it will be able to understand reality on its own is, in essence, a Kantian debate about the limits of understanding and the possibility of accessing the thing in itself. If a machine processes the world through binary code, its phenomenon will be binary. Could a machine ever intuit the noumenon? Kant would probably say no, as even the most powerful reason is limited by its own rules of operation. This inevitably leads us to reflect on virtual reality and simulations. If all our experience is a mental construction mediated by categories, how can we be sure we are not living in an advanced simulation? Kant did not need computers to raise this existential doubt. His answer was that it doesn't matter if reality is a simulation or a biological creation. What matters is that the laws governing that experience are consistent and universal for us. Truth for Kant is not correspondence with the hidden world, but coherence within the rules of our own reason. This deconstruction of reality allows us to approach themes as dense as morality and freedom, which Kant explored in his later works, but whose foundations are right here. If the world of phenomena is governed by strict causal laws, where every action has a reaction, where is the room for human freedom? If we are part of the phenomenal world, we are determined just like any falling stone. But Kant suggests that in the realm of the noumenon, in that dimension we cannot know but can intuit, is where our freedom resides. We are citizens of two worlds, the world of physical necessity and the world of moral freedom. This duality is what allows us to be ethical beings. Without the critique of pure reason, we would not have a solid basis for universal human rights or for the idea that every individual possesses a dignity that transcends their physical utility. The influence of this thought extends to pop culture and contemporary narrative. Films like The Matrix or Inception constantly play with the Kantian idea that what we perceive is only a surface layer and that the true structure of reality is hidden behind a veil of mental processing. Science fiction cinema is in many ways a Kantian laboratory where we test the limits of our understanding. But to understand this fully, we must look toward modern psychology. Many psychologists suggest that our mental health depends on our ability to organize the chaos of life through narratives, which are an expanded form of Kantian categories. When we lose the ability to make sense of time or causality, our reality crumbles. Anxiety, from a philosophical point of view, could be understood as the vertigo we feel when looking into the abyss of the noumenon, realizing that our mental constructions are fragile and that the world in itself is vast, strange, and indifferent to our desires. Kant, in his small Prussian town, understood that the greatest journey a human being can undertake is not crossing oceans, but exploring the frontiers of their own mind. His life itself was a testament to this inner journey. It is said that he never traveled more than 100 kilometers from his home, and yet his mind encompassed the totality of metaphysics. This paradox teaches us that the depth of knowledge does not depend on the quantity of experiences we accumulate, but on the sharpness with which we analyze the conditions of those experiences. The relevance of Kant also manifests in the dilemmas of quantum physics. Physicists have discovered that at the subatomic level, the act of observing a phenomenon changes the behavior of the particles. This is pure Kantianism applied to the laboratory. The subject who observes is not independent of the object observed. The reality we measure is a reality for us, shaped by our technical instruments and our mathematical theories, which are nothing more than extensions of our mental categories. The dream of a theory of everything, a single equation that explains the entire universe, constantly faces Kant's warning: we can only know that which fits into our perceptual molds. If the universe has additional dimensions or logics that do not fit in our cerebral structure, they will remain forever as noumena, silent and inaccessible realities. This should not be a cause for despair, but for wonder. The critique of pure reason is, ultimately, a song to the creative power of the human spirit. It tells us that we are the creators of order, beauty and law in a cosmos that would otherwise be unintelligible noise. It is fascinating to observe how contemporary education still drinks from these sources. When we teach a child to reason, to look for causes and effects, or to distinguish between an objective fact and a subjective opinion, we are following the instruction manual that Kant wrote more than 200 years ago. His insistence that knowledge begins with experience, but not everything comes from it, is the basis of modern pedagogies that value both empirical observation and the development of critical faculties. Kant taught us that thinking for oneself means understanding the rules of our own thinking. It is not an act of blind rebellion, but an act of intellectual responsibility. In a world saturated with information, fake news, and algorithmic filter bubbles, Kant's invitation to critically examine the tools with which we process information is more urgent than ever. We are surrounded by new filters, no longer just biological, but digital, which shape our perception of social phenomena. To be a Kantian subject in the 21st century implies constantly asking, what part of what I see is reality and what part is the bias of my own cognitive architecture or the algorithm that feeds me? Looking back and seeing the long road traveled since that 1781, we realize that Kant didn't just write a philosophy book, but designed the map of modernity. His work is a reminder that reason is our most powerful tool, but also one that has clear limits. Recognizing those limits does not make us weaker, but wiser. It protects us from the fanaticism of believing we possess the absolute truth and protects us from the nihilism of believing that no truth exists. In that middle ground, in that constant tension between what we can know and what we can only dream, is where human life unfolds. The critique of pure reason invites us to inhabit that frontier with courage. It tells us that although we are trapped in our own mind, that mind is an infinite palace full of fascinating structures. Every time we solve a logical problem, every time we marvel at the regularity of the laws of physics, we are paying an unconscious tribute to the old professor from Königsberg. His legacy is the certainty that as long as there is a human being thinking, the universe will have a meaning, a form, and a purpose, because we are the ones who grant them. The journey through Kant's thought leaves us in a very different place than where we started. We can no longer look at a tree or a sunset in the same way. We know there is something there, a vibrant and mysterious reality, but we also know that the color green, the golden light, and the feeling of peace are gifts of our own consciousness. This realization is the first step toward true intellectual freedom. Kant freed us from the tyranny of external objects and gave us the keys to our own mental house. He taught us that knowledge is a collective construction of humanity based on a structure we all share, which unites us in a community of rational beings. This is the basis of justice and coexistence, the idea that we all see the world through the same basic lenses and that therefore we can reach universal agreements. As we close this deep deconstruction, it is impossible not to feel a kind of sacred vertigo. The Critique of Pure Reason is not just a textbook, it is a monument to human curiosity and intellectual honesty. Kant warned us that pure reason is like a dove that, feeling the resistance of the air, thinks it would fly much better in a vacuum. But without the resistance of the air, the dove could not fly at all. In the same way, without the limits of our experience, our thought would be nothing. We need limits to have a form. We need shadows to appreciate the light. In this vast essay on the mind, we have discovered that reality is a dance between what we receive from the world and what we put into it. It is an eternal collaboration between the mystery of the thing in itself and the clarity of our categories. Immanuel Kant, with his powdered wig and his slow walk, left us a message that resonates through the centuries: the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. These are the two things that fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe. The starry sky represents the phenomenon, the order our mind imposes on the universe. The moral law represents our link with the absolute, with what lies beyond the senses. At the end of this journey through the depths of reason, we are left with the feeling that, although we can never touch the heart of the universe with our hands, we can always understand it with our mind, because to a certain extent, that universe is ourselves. It has been a dense, demanding, and revealing journey, a journey that forces us to be humbler before mystery and more ambitious before knowledge. May this exploration of Kantian work not be a final point, but a new starting point for your own critical reflection. The world is there waiting to be thought by you. Thank you for joining me in this analysis of the architecture of our own existence. See you in the next exploration of the great ideas that have shaped who we are. See you soon.